do you buy the house and then you make it into multiple rooms? Do you try to maximize the space? How do you actually approach once you get it? How do you?
So yeah, I think that's been the focus for the past couple of years. Just buying and then subdividing the actual property and then building outside where there's space and trying to get as much as you can. But I think the focus now going forward is actually going to change slightly. Because I think, this is just my view. My view is I think this is one bubble that's going to burst one day. So I think for the
what do you mean?
For the I think,
Amen.
and this is my view.
Elaborate.
Welcome to episode 17 of the Business Agenda podcast. This podcast is available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. My name is Cash, also known as Uncle Cash, also known as the Joburg Bachelor. We have a special guest joining us today. Let me go around the room and greet the team. We've got Nico, for regular viewers, you also know Teaser, aka Vinyl_T. Our guest today is a very special guest, Mr. Busisani Sibia. And I think it's great that we have him here in line with our previous episode. It's almost like we're continuing all things property related. We're like back in our property corner days. Also like to acknowledge Miza, who's here putting in work in the background, and Seppo, who makes all these great visuals available, and also Tabi, the man behind the great audio that you hear on this podcast. So before we get into the guest and the topic that we're going to unpack, just to, as always, check and see how the team is doing, how the week was, how everyone's feeling, winter blues, interest rates, how you guys doing in general. Are you feeling the pinch?
Yeah, hey, I'm fine as Zakhala, man. Zakhala strong. You now have to like at the beginning of the year, everybody always says you gotta make a side hustle.
True.
Like right now, you have to pay attention to your side hustle.
Yeah, the side hustles are no longer passion projects.
Yeah.
They're just bringing a little bit of income, but now it has to be invested into and given proper attention.
And it sucks because when you work, you're like, we just got an increase the other month.
Yeah.
You can't go back and like, hey guys.
Exactly. That's the thing with the timing of to then ask for more, employer just look at you like, we just gave you something, and even if you justify it, and it would be justified because trying to keep up with just inflation and the cost of living. But yeah, I think the conventional belt tightening that we will speak of on the podcast is like really, really, if you lost like extra weight now to go to those other holes, that's what you not really need to do with the income. So no, but gents, thank you as always. I think great topic that we have today. As we discussed in episode 2 of investing in township property, it was obviously unpacking. Thank you for everyone who listens to the podcast, shares it on their platforms. We appreciate the listens. That podcast and that last episode was great in that we were obviously just unpacking, township economy, the pros and cons. Tabo, Teaser, and obviously Nico outlining their journeys, the pros and cons, their different approaches from buying and also developing and renovating. So, we want to profile a different aspect, obviously, to just the property and accommodation space. That's where we're going to unpack our guest. For those of you who are going to research him, do not be blown away too much because his LinkedIn profile is nothing short of impeccable. CA, MCOM, PhD candidate, tax aficionado. Yeah, but I think what we want to unpack is his entrepreneurial journey. He's also dabbles in the property space. He's got rooms, apartments, which is also a critical space, as we've mentioned on the previous episode, that there are people who just look for rooms, in that kind of accommodation, whether it's just for the week when they reside outside Gauteng. So, Mr. Sabia, first and foremost, thank you for joining us, and how are you keeping?
Thanks for the invite, gents. I'm honored to be here.
Fresh from Europe.
Hey.
Passport stamps.
Yeah. No, but I'm keeping up, man. Yeah,
okay. So I think maybe to start,
I was gonna ask you, how did you find property in Europe, because they have like amazing history
established. Yeah,
no, they have beautiful architecture there. Like when I was there, I was just like, wow, the whole time, But I think what I also noticed is a lot of the cities actually have very similar structures. So Europe is beautiful, I won't lie. And I did about 10 countries, but I must say, even in that, I think there were a lot of similarities in terms of their architecture. So it's beautiful, but I just think that it's too similar.
Yeah.
The city center.
Yeah, it's just the same vibe, Jay. Yeah,
And even some of the old architecture, as great as it is to look, if you travel from Nice to Rome, after a while, from the churches to the old buildings, the structure is kind of similar. Town planning.
But you know, like some of their churches are like 300-400 years old.
That's what gets
Hand
impressive.
built,
Hand
like-
built, like where like each stone was like chipped, like stone masons who like made it, and clay stood the test of time. But I do understand probably why you're saying it's quite similar, you know. And then I'm sure you probably had a different appreciation for what we have here in Africa and South Africa specifically in terms of just different architecture, more modern variety.
Most definitely, yeah. I think in Africa, actually, broadly, because I think, and that's what I was saying to some of the guys, that, you know, one of the things I noticed was the fact that Africa is different. You know, Africa is different spectrums. I mean, you go to East Africa. I mean, I've been to a few East African countries. You go there, it's completely different in terms of what you can expect, even the architecture, you know. And I think, I mean, if you go to West Africa or North Africa, like there are a lot of variations, even within just the culture, the people, exposure. And I think part of it has to do with our colonization, that we were colonized by different, you know, colonizers, and they brought in their own cultures which differed, and that you can actually see that when you actually travel. Whereas I think in Europe, I mean, a lot of the things, they are very similar. But yeah, I think I have a new appreciation now for Africa, having been to Europe. Yeah.
So I guess, man, maybe just to get to the property stuff locally, you know, without going too far back, I guess how did it start for you? Most of us, I mean, is it that thing of you bought your first property, you were staying there, or you tried to rent it out, and then how did your journey sort of start?
So my journey started similar. I think, I mean, and I wish, looking back, I think I wish I would have done things differently, you know. And I've actually been fortunate that someone asked me now just this week to say, I mean, one of the guys that, actually asked me, I think he saw a flat that was available for sale, and he asked me if I think he should buy it, and I said to him, please don't. I asked him, do you want to buy it as your primary residence or for investment? He said investment. I said to him, don't buy it. Don't go the flat route. I said to him, don't do it. Rather go ekasi and go buy ekasi. You have much more to gain from there. So I think my journey started the typical way, you know, young profession, just starting to work, you can afford your first property, and you just go, you know, like apartment, get an apartment. So what I did was I bought a 2-bedroom apartment, and I rented one of the rooms to one of my friends for about 2 years, you know, until I qualified as a CA, and I got paid slightly more, and I was able to afford my second one, you know. And even then I still went and bought another property which is also in an apartment. And I think, looking back, I mean, if I knew then what I know now, I think I wouldn't have gone that route. I would have gone straight Ekasi. I mean, as young as I was, I think there's a lot of potential at Ekasi, and I think there's a lot of spaces, and I think a lot of people actually starting to realize that. But okay, maybe sticking to the question. So that's how I started, basically. I bought my first apartment, rented a bedroom to a friend, and then bought my second one, rented it out to a few friends, and then that's how I started, and then I built from there.
And then when did the realization that there's more money on the other side come?
I think that came a bit later, because I think I started investing in property, or bought my first property. It was around 2011 actually. And I got my second one in 2012. And I think it was only in 2017 that I realized, no, actually I've been doing this thing the wrong way, you know.
Okay.
And at the time I was fortunate enough that I was able to sell both those properties and accumulate enough capital to go and buy more property at Kasi, and that's when I started pumping and started going in. So, but I'm actually lying. I mean, in 2017 I still bought one, and I wanted to try out. I wanted to see how the Kasi property market worked, and I did that thing for about a year or two, and then I realized that actually made more sense than what I had in apartments. So I then sold apartments and bought more properties at Kasi.
Which Kasi did you go for?
So I went to Ekatlehong. That's where I started, actually.
Okay.
That's where I started, and that's where I still am for the most part. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I suppose we've sort of covered a lot of that stuff, you know, buying and converting, and I suppose to you, what does your typical property look like in the township? So do you buy the house and then you make it into multiple rooms? Do you try to maximize the space? How do you actually approach once you get it? How do you? So
yeah, I think that's been the focus for the past couple of years, you know. just buying and then subdividing the actual property and then building outside where there's space and trying to get as much as you can. But I think the focus now going forward is actually going to change slightly. Because I think, this is just my view. My view is I think this is one bubble that's going to burst one day. So I think for the
what do you mean?
For the I think,
Amen.
and this is my view.
Elaborate.
And this is just my view. This is just my view. So I think a lot of people have actually realized Uguti, the Kasi property market is working. It's very functional. We have projects now like Indlu, where if you own a property at Kasi, you don't have the means to build, they come in and they help you build, and then you share in the spoils. And so I think at some point it's going to burst this bubble. It's not going to last forever, So I think now anyone that looks into getting into property must try and be slightly smarter than the typical guy that's been doing it, And there are a lot of places where you see Uguti, this property thing is booming. Places like Viladiza, you go there, like every second house is a double story with rooms outside. You go to Protea, every second house is, So I think it's booming, and I think it works for now. But in my view, at some point it's going to end, and I think whoever comes in must actually come in with also a view to exit. Like, how do you exit? I think that's where I am now. I'm trying to think, okay, I've been doing this, and now I'm trying to think of ways to actually look at it differently without losing a lot.
Okay, makes sense. So in terms of your journey, because I think me and Nico, because we all start and you kinda you find people to help you. You've grown to an extent that you kinda now have a team. So you have builders. Are you keeping them like on salary, or do you have guys that you work with and then you pay them, or how did you manage the growth and how are you handling your growth?
So yes, that's correct. Yeah, so I have a team of guys that work full time for me, and I think there I was very smart in terms of building the team, because I managed to recruit people with different skills. So with my guys, we can literally build a house from scratch, like ground up, covered, everything, burglars, doors, everything fitted, complete, and we can just give you a key, with just the team I have, So I think I've been smart in the sense that I've managed to keep those guys. So that works, and that's actually a catch-22 situation, because now you have these guys that are working there for you full-time, and if you don't have new projects for them, then you're actually losing in a way.
Paying.
Because you could be saving that money, but for as long as you're building, you're actually benefiting, you're saving,
Yeah.
So I think it works, but I think we've managed to build our portfolio to a point where salaries, I don't want to say salaries are nothing, but where we rather keep them. We can afford to let things run, and it's just your typical business with a salary expense line item. That's it. Yeah.
I guess then do you then like do other work for other people, since they can build? They have the know-how.
So I used to do that. I used to do some renovations for people and stuff, and I think I did like a couple of projects, and very good projects. We renovated some houses and bathrooms and stuff. But it ended up becoming a headache for me, because now I need to go there and I need to quote, and if you misquote, then you lose, and this
inspections,
and inspections, and But so I then stopped doing that. So we did renovations for other people for the most part, but I think now the focus is actually on our projects. And like I said, I think we're fortunate enough that we are able to run our projects. We're able to keep busy on our projects without having to bring in outside projects.
So you don't do any sort of like on the maintenance side and all of that for like existing township properties with your stuff? Like, do you step in sometimes to assist other guys who have their own properties from a maintenance perspective, or even like from an administrative perspective, I guess, like rental collections and things like that?
So we do. So one of the things that we do is we do management for people, right? So like maintenance work, basically, where if you have a property, we can come in, we agree on a fee, and we literally take over your maintenance. Your tenants have an issue, they contact us, we send our guys there to fix stuff, and we manage the whole thing for you. All you do is you collect your money and you spend it however you want to spend it, but then you just pay us our management fee. So we actually do that. We do that.
Is it profitable?
Depends. So
because you usually some people, you don't even charge them a lot of money, and
so it depends. It differs from month to month. if someone is paying you, let's say 5,000 rands, and they don't have any maintenance work needed, then you score, you know. But sometimes you need to drive there 10 times in a month, and it's petrol and it's labor and it's this. And sometimes maybe it's a skill that you don't really have.
You have to outsource.
Rope in someone to, and you have to pay them, obviously. So it depends. I mean, it's all a gamble, you know. But yeah, it works for the most part. Yeah.
Okay, and then I guess the other big issue that we always have, which I often struggle with, like how to because you know I started with the company, but I'm not sure when do you actually approach suppliers, you know, to get preferential rates, because I'm sure you are there now. When you build, you know that these guys, you know, when we buy bricks at 20 rands, you're probably getting them at a decent rate just because of that familiarity. Is that how you approach some of your things? Do you have relationships with suppliers to help you sort of manage because that's the other side of this thing, how to keep costs low?
Yeah, true. Yeah, so I think we've gotten to that point where, I mean, a lot of our suppliers know us now, you know, where we can sometimes just go in, take stuff and pay later, or go in and negotiate good prices, or when they have specials, they just tell us, okay, you know what, we're going to be having a special running from this day to this day. These are the things that you might be interested in, you know. We get brochures and we get that information upfront or beforehand, and we're able to then maximize on those things. So, yeah, but that, I must say, has taken quite a bit of time. Because I think it took us about 3 years to get to where we are now in terms of those relationships, you know. Yeah. But I think over the years, our suppliers have learned to, and we have a very good relationship with them actually. Yeah. Some of the guys are like, no, take stuff, you'll pay later, whatever, and then we.
But is this like reputable companies like builders or?
Yes, we actually have. I wasn't sure if I could name some of them, but yeah. So like your Mica, your builders, your Cash Build. So some of them actually we have a relationship with them, you know. And there are others that you like to build a relationship with still, but some of them are still rigid. But you know.
So I guess then at some stage you opened a company, or is it multiple companies? How do you handle all of this, you know, from a corporate perspective?
So for various reasons, one of them being tax, and obviously trying to benefit from small business corporation, you know.
Having masters in tax, obviously,
and doing a PhD.
Yeah. So
okay.
Yeah. So I've had to keep everything within one business, you know.
Okay.
So that everything is just like streamlined easily. But yeah, everything is just done I would have loved to do it in more or have separate accounts or businesses do that, but I unfortunately, like I said, I mean, for various reasons, I think it's more beneficial for us to do it
under one vehicle.
And I suppose the other part about that is you probably, because I'm sure you are probably at a stage where you don't struggle as much with funding now, because then the company is making a lot more income. You know, from financial perspective, like your company can actually have,
or maybe ask like, how are you funded, or like how are you basically funding the projects and all of that.
Yeah, that's actually a very good question and an important one. I think. A few weeks ago we were conducting interviews for admin for someone to do admin, and one of the interviewees actually asked, "What's the biggest challenge for the business now?" And I said to them, "The biggest challenge is funding." You know, and I'll explain why. I mean, if you are in consulting or if you are consulting, all you're doing is you're selling your time. You know, the more time you spend on something, the more you invoice. You know, and that's how you make your money. But in this business, it's different, you know. You need to incur money to start making money. And unfortunately, you can't say, Aline, if you want to do a project that will cost you, say, R1 million, you have to incur the full R1 million to start getting the return, you know. And the return will not come as R1 million every month. It will come as 50,000 a month or 20,000 a month, you know, and you make that over time. So funding is still a big thing. But one of the things I did a few years ago, and I think that's where I was able to differentiate myself and maybe I don't want to say build a reputation, but I think one of the things I've been smart on is working on the funding. So funding for me is not an issue, and I'll explain why or how that's not an issue. So a few years ago, like I said, when I started buying a car, I bought properties because I had like a bit of cash and I bought properties. But then what happened was at some point I ran out of money to buy, you know, because I would buy and then buy and buy. And at some point I literally ran out of money. And I said to myself, but how can I keep this thing going? How can I keep this wheel rolling so that I don't stop, you know? One of the things was then under Abakibeng, what I did was I then created an investment scheme for people, you know. And at the time, that's when people were saying, no, let's buy a stock fair, let's all contribute 5,000 a month and go buy a property. And I had to prove to a lot of people that formula doesn't work, in my view. By the way, that's my view. So what I then did was I said to people, listen, you want to invest in property and you want to do it as what's the word, as passive as possible.
Passive
and I said
income,
to people,
yeah.
passive income. And I said to people, the typical investment in property is not passive. I mean, you guys have you know, you get a call at midnight like, hey, nini pugile, you know, like giza amanza wasebenzi, you know, whatever, you know. And you don't realize it's not passive, you know. So what I then did was I said, okay, it's pointless for me to try and own 100% of every property, you know. At some point I need to let off some property so that I can build more on my side. So what I then did was I actually approached a few people to say, listen, I have a proposal for you. So I can sell, I'd say to people, okay, here's a property that I own, fully owned, everything, and this is how much we're making. I can sell you a portion of this property, right? And then that way I was able to then sell off portions of my properties to then get money in and then to start new projects or to actually fund more projects.
Okay.
I did that, and at some point I was like, but I don't want to lose too much of my own hard work as well, you know. But what I did was I then changed the model slightly. I approached a few friends and said, listen, I have a proposal for you where you can make more money than the banks can ever make you, you know. And like, but how do you do that? I said to him, fine, listen, I do properties or projects on the side. So if you want, you can come in and fund my projects, and I'll pay you, say, 2% per month. I said to him, try and beat that, right? And then people looked at it and I thought, actually, this is a good idea, you know? So when I'm building or when I'm running a new project, I'll then fund the project, and then at some point I'll be like, say, listen, I need some money to fund this thing.
Okay.
Don't you want to pay top up? And then they'll then come in and top up, and I'll pay them the 2%. You can't beat that.
What do you mean by 2%? So 2% of what? Like
Of the capital.
Capital
Yeah.
per month.
Per month.
Okay.
Per month, yeah. So I'd say, for example, let's say you pay, hypothetically, say 100,000. I'll say to you, give me 100,000 on the first of the month. At the end of the month, I'll give you 102,000 rands.
Okay.
And I said to him, try beat that. And you can't. You know?
You want.
And
Yeah,
that
I
is
want
how-
because
The bank is giving you per annum.
per annum, exactly. It's
Yeah.
giving 2% per month. Yeah.
Yeah, you know. So then I think that's how I've made it more attractive to people to then want to invest. And then, so I would do that and then pay them off and then manage to run my own project, continue my own project. That way I was still able to fund the project and get it done as quickly as possible and without selling off any stake in that project.
But then if you're using their money, how do you pay them back? Because the capital, for instance, if you're building a property and it was gonna cost you, or it's costing you 500,000, I'm assuming they're giving you 100 up until you get to 500,000.
Yeah. So obviously with every project, you want to start that project with your own money, you know. You wouldn't want to finance the full 500,000, you know. And sometimes, you also make mistakes where you think, okay, yeah, this project will cost me, say, 500,000, and you start, and then you get to like 450 or like 300 and 400. Like,
Then there's no roof.
and you can see, like, you know, and then steel prices go up, and then cement prices, bricks go up, and you're thinking, now my 500 initial budget is actually gonna be, I'm actually gonna exceed that, and then you need then that funding for like some of those eventualities.
No, I'm saying once the property is finished, do you then get some debt on the property, then you pay them out?
No. So
Or you take it from your profits when your other projects make money.
Yes, yeah.
You know what I mean? Because the spend still has to happen.
Yes, yeah.
Someone can borrow you, but to pay them back, you need to retain their initial capital, obviously.
Yeah. I think that's where other things come into play. And that's why people be like, but why don't you quit work and then go and
Do it full
like
time.
you can't with this business. You know, if I was selling time, if I was consulting, I'd say, you know what, I'm selling my time to my employer. I can just switch and then sell my time to my clients. But this business works differently. You need to invest a lot of money to get money out, you know.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, you invest a million rands, you get back 15, 20,000 rands
it's
a month.
more. It's a long-term project.
So it's one of those things where you need to have a job. You need to keep working. You need to be able to then
Some
Some
other
element,
sources of income.
yeah.
Okay.
So then you know, what you can at month end, when I get my salary, I need to pay this guy 100,000. Unfortunately, you know,
Yeah.
and I need to, you know. So it's those
Okay.
things that you need to
Okay.
consider.
So, what's your experience then with still on the funding topic with trying to obtain funding to finance properties in the township, for example, right? Because well, from what I'm hearing, obviously you didn't mention a bank once in what you just said. So just I don't know why specifically, or if you just stay clear from them in the townships.
So I stay clear from banks everywhere, not just in the townships. I mean, I think with banks, then there's a lot of red tape that comes into play, and then you have a lot of registered debt, and then you want to get something debt for something else, you can't because you have all of these credit cards and loans and whatever that you need to service, you know. So for me, that's one of the reasons I'm like, you know what, let me get this other debt on the side where it's not registered.
It's off balance sheet.
It's off balance sheet, you know? Well, not really off balance sheet, but also I know if I owe Unico 50,000 and I owe Absa 50,000. Absa's gonna say pay me 1,000 rand a month. Unico knows he needs to get 51,000 at the end of the month. I know I'm gonna be pushed to pay Unico at the end of the month. You know? Whereas the bank, I'm like, man, they can just take that 1,000. I don't care. You know. So I think that also pushes me, and I know once I've paid Unico that 51,000, I've actually financed my project with my own 50,000 from my own pocket. You know. So that's one of the reasons I'm like, no, I'd rather go this route than go the bank route.
But I don't understand why can't the business borrow?
So
okay, red tape I get, but if it's making money, it's got a balance sheet, it's got assets, or it does have debt, it doesn't have debt at all.
No, we don't have debt. I think the only debt we have is for 2 properties that we have. It's actually 1 property. We actually have debt for 1 property actually. All the other properties we were fortunate to fund.
No, I think
I can understand why.
I'm not representing any financial institution here, but there's a low-hanging fruit here. So if you have a property transactor, deal maker,
are you just tired of the admin that comes with it, and
or you've just got a system that's working, you just continue to work that?
I think we have a system that works because even with that one that I'm telling you about the bank, I mean, the property value now is so much that if we were to sell the property, we'll be able to pay the bank off and then have a lot of money back in actually. But I think for me, I've never been someone who really loved that, you know. Like I said, I mean, I'd rather. Yeah, I know. But
I understand leverage.
Yeah. So literally in our books, the only debt we have is that and one of the trucks that we own. So we have a truck that we use to do our deliveries. So that's the only debt that we have. And I think when you have less debt, then you have more equity. So I'd rather know Guti, I'm building a business that's growing in equity than know Guti, I'm just making banks money. In my view, that's why I'm saying, Uti, we do have. Well, we don't have debt now, no. But
so you just don't like long-term debt?
No, I don't.
For the business, yeah.
Like I said, I'd rather pay someone 2% per month than pay the bank 10% per year or something like that, you know.
Yeah.
Whereas I know, Uti, I'm gonna pay this guy in a month. I'm done, and then I'm
incentivized to pay them quicker.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think it sounds like entrepreneur perspective of where you like to pivot and move quickly and not be tied, especially from a financing perspective. You borrow 50,000 from Nico, you pay him back quickly, and you're more incentivized to pay him off the 51,000 as opposed to the bank taking the 1,000, and then gives you a bit of flexibility in terms of if you need to move at short notice on another property or more funding. So, which I understand, but I also understand teaser from me saying, but you're a CA, you understand the ins and outs of how to leverage what the assets you have. Because I'm sure, like Nico said, low-hanging fruit, there'll be plenty of financiers who'd be happy to fund you in terms of. Speaking of funding, have you ever considered maybe like some of the SOEs, like your IDCs or others who fund in terms of, had you any experience in that kind of space, or you've just always just gone your own way?
So I've just gone my own way, but like, I think with the new perspective that we have now, we might actually make use of those institutions. Because I think, like I was saying, Guti, in terms of the future, I think we're now looking at going more into sectional titling, you know, where we're thinking of, actually we have a property now where that is almost ready for sectional titling. We built, I think it's about 5 units, bachelor units, 1-bedroom units, just a mix. So we want to actually use that as our guinea pig where we try and sell that off like in sectional site. So we're busy with that process now. So that's what I was saying.
The township?
No, it's actually not far from here actually.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's what I was saying earlier, Guti. I think that's where we are now, where we're looking less in terms of building for rental, but more in terms of building to resell.
Yeah.
Sectional title.
Yeah, that's definitely more profit. Your guys on salary.
Yeah.
That makes sense. It's going to be very profitable for you.
Yeah. So I think that's the route we're going now.
And I think probably that extends your point about how you feel at some point that bubble's going to burst in Kasi, where everyone's doing it aggressively. But with this, if you go into sectional title, you know, you're building to sell off, and then you can always keep that model going.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Maybe just to go back to that. I mean, how do you feel then about the crisis because of the housing crisis, especially in Joburg, or in Gauteng, the fact that we still have like so many people still staying in shacks and still staying in conditions that are not great. You know what I mean? Like for me, when I look at that and then we mention a bubble, it's almost like it's a disconnect, if you know what I mean, because there's more people that really need proper housing. And for me, people that build, I guess maybe that's what could fail. That people might not move from shacks to go rent. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm wondering like what would cause a bubble to burst?
Like an oversupply, as in like would we find ourselves in Kasi having an oversupply of rooms essentially? Because that would probably then be why like this current bubble would burst. Because right now we are on low advertising. People are always looking for rooms and things like that, right? So I think
the demand is there.
It will get more difficult, or it would get more difficult. But yeah, so would that then be sort of like what you're saying, like that imbalance where there's an oversupply? Or
so in my view, there are a number of factors, and that being one of them, you know, where I mean, for example, with this project, I think it's called Indlu, if I'm not mistaken, where they come in and if you own a property at Kasi, they then come in and they help you build, and then you start generating money. Now imagine if everyone who owns a house then realizes actually one of my friends has a view that says if you're in this business, you're not an entrepreneur. Like you're not an entrepreneur. What are you doing? Like it's not, you're not an entrepreneur.
Income. Yeah.
You know? You need more than just this to
actually survive it. Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
exactly.
I agree.
So I mean, if you think about it, I mean, if everyone who owns a house at Kasi, they're not working, they have no form of income and whatever, they're thinking, I can go get those guys to come and build a marumla, I'll get income from that, then they'll definitely create an oversupply. Yeah. I mean, we all know now with the economic crisis that we're facing now, jobs are decreasing now and stuff like that, you know.
Yeah,
but I think also what I've also noticed is I think there are levels to this thing in terms of the tenants that you also market, you know. Ekasi, I think typically you'd be marketing like Abantu Basekasi, you know, Mjita, who's just started working, he doesn't enjoy Ukleleka anymore, he wants to get his own room and, you know, his own space and whatever. Maybe a girlfriend and they move in there, they stay there. But then I think when you come to your former suburbs, then you have a different kind of tenant. Now you have maybe some of the foreigners, Zimbabweans, and some of the guys from Malawi who are scared to go and stay at Kasi for xenophobic reasons or whatever, you know. So you have those guys in there. So you also think about it, Guti, with all these threats, there's xenophobia, we don't want them foreigners, no. I think if that thing materializes and we lose all these foreigners, in my view,
crash,
those people are all going to leave. Number one, or even if you don't get to that point, even if they realize, you know, South Africa is not as conducive as it used to be. Yeah. Let's go to other countries.
Yeah, I mean, like ESCOM, for instance.
You know, it's not, South Africa is not conducive. They leave. Guess what? Those of us who are targeting your former suburbs are now going to have a vacancy now.
Correct. Yeah.
And once you have that vacancy now, because I mean, if you think about it, a lot of the guys who rent within this tier are your Zimbabweans, Nigerians, they don't want to go stay at Kasi, you know, but they also maybe can't afford the same thing, you know. So there's somewhere in the middle. So you are catching all these guys, you know. Yeah. If they leave, then you're going to have a vacancy here. Yeah. And if you do, then you'll be forced to drop your prices. When you do, in my view, the guys, the guy who sometimes maybe Pick and Pay, SNT, but maybe Alex will be like, no, I can actually move to a Lindes. Now, rent Lindes has dropped now. Yeah. And they're going to leave and then move into these spaces. Now you've dropped your prices here, and guess what? Here it leaves a space as well.
Yeah, I get you.
That's I mean also with the thing there, expropriation without compensation. I mean, I think there's a lot of factors at play here. You know.
I think you're right. So and I think you're right, because the important part is you cannot do this as a side thing. Yeah. You cannot play in property and say no unless if you wanna buy apartments.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you're buying apartments, your tenant is paying you, those are easier.
Yeah.
Quote unquote easier. But the township one, like we saw as well, like with you know, you think you're gonna build and you're gonna move and it's gonna start making money. It doesn't work like that. Yeah. You need to be hands-on. You need to run it like a business. And I think there'll be more people that get exposed that they were not ready for that.
Yeah,
you probably are right. Yeah.
So I think that's definitely. I think that's the point that needs to be highlighted. That you can't run this kind of enterprise as a like half in half out or by remote control. It's like I've seen people try to do that with farming, for example. That doesn't work. You have to be fully in because there's so many factors that can happen when you're managing a property, a castle, back rooms. You have to be hands on in if you don't have a team, like in his case. That's where, like, I think also just trying to highlight so people can be quite aware that, look, be fully vested time wise. I think, like, that from a time perspective, it's important because, Nico, you've shared many experiences of how it becomes quite involving and to the point where you have to then outsource and get Tsepo to start managing your property. Because sometimes a lot of these things you hear in discussions, social media, be like, I want to get into this without doing proper due diligence or knowing how involving it is. And then sometimes people then come back and start complaining about what's required. But from those of us or those who are in the space, they know that, no, this is part and parcel. This is par for the course for this kind of thing. You're not just going to get in, start making money, and it's smooth sailing.
Yeah.
Because then that really needs to be highlighted.
Yeah, just on that, my question is essentially you're quite busy, a busy person, you have a full-time job and all of that. So with all the involvement and all of that, like, how do you manage your time to make sure that, yes, you have people who work for you, but you still need to go check that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing and all of that. So, like, how do you play around in terms of dividing up your time and making sure things are happening in the background, whether you are there or not? You just left for a month and you didn't lose. Yeah, nothing went up in flames and so yeah.
So interesting you asked me that question today because actually yesterday I had a meeting with the guys, with each and every one of the guys. And I said to them, thank you very much. And I said to them, for the first time, I'm starting to feel like I can slowly let go of the business. And I've said to them, thank you. Actually, I mean, things did happen even when I was in Europe. I'll be honest with you, going to Europe, that was one of my biggest headaches. I mean, on the one hand, I wanted to enjoy this free time. On the other hand, I was like, what if one of the houses falls? Or what if one of the houses bends down or something, But I think they were able to hold the fort, And I mean, yesterday I literally had one-on-ones with each and every one of them just to say thank you, and just to let you know. I mean, one of the skills that we still needed to outsource was carpentry, So we actually, one of the places that we just developed now, we had like an amazing concept, and I must say it was one of the guys within the business who thought of it, where we build now wardrobes, and then a section of those wardrobes actually leads to the bathroom, So like when you look at it, it's like a wardrobe, and then you open the doors, it actually leads you to the bathroom, And it was one of the guys who actually thought about it. I was like, that's just brilliant, So and we still needed to get a carpenter to come in and build cupboards and build your wardrobes and all of those things. And I think one of the carpenters let us down for the first time. And the guys were like, we can try and do this ourselves. I said to him, guys, I'll get all the materials, please do it. They did it exactly as if it was done by one of the professional carpenters that we used. I said to myself, we're never ever getting a carpenter coming in now anymore, So now we know we've got that skill now in the bag, So and now there was a place that we needed to convert. And I said to myself, I don't want to get involved. I said, you guys can run with the whole project. I literally went there yesterday for the first time and everything is done. I said to them, I couldn't have thought of something better, So I think with time, you learn to trust the guys, and you learn to. I mean, I was listening to an interview now. One entrepreneur said, when you spot talent or when you spot skill as an entrepreneur, make sure you capture that skill. Make sure you keep that skill. Yeah. And I think my guys are at that point where they're able to run with things, and I can literally let go of the business now slowly, But coming back to your time, I must be honest with you, Nico, it's very difficult. I mean, it's a challenge, having to be an employee yourself, having to be an employer, having to be a son, a brother, like whatever.
You're very difficult to get a hold of.
I know. Hopefully with time that will change. With time that will change.
Do you have a PA?
I was thinking the same thing.
I actually do, yeah. I mean, I have someone that's responsible for booking my flights and checking where I'm supposed to be and where I'm supposed to travel, and when I need to find things for myself personally, I'm like, hey, please help me find this, and then they'll go look for things for me, and they'll tell me these are the prices, this is what, and I just go there and buy. So unfortunately, I do have a PA. Yeah.
I'm glad like if we had started this conversation on that note, someone who was listening would probably think that you know, it's so nice to be an entrepreneur and all of that. So I'm glad we started off by talking about the difficulties surrounding entrepreneurship before we actually asked you about, you know, like, you know, going to Europe, this, that. Because some people tend to have the perception that entrepreneurship is smooth sailing all the way, like not really highlighting some of the challenges that one then gets to face, right? So, and I'm sure you do have some challenges that you face on a daily basis with tenants and things like that, right?
Every day, my man, every day. You know, and you're right. I mean, I think a lot of people see entrepreneurship as, yo, I'll have all the time to myself. Yo, I'll do this, you know. Oh, I'll be able to just fly to Cape Town for the weekend and fly back just for fun. It's a lot deeper than that, you know. I mean, you have sleepless nights. I mean, there are nights when you just wake up in the middle of the night like, how do I get around this, you know? But I think one of the things I've learned over time as an entrepreneur is that you do get through everything. You do get to the other side of every challenge, you know. And I've learned not to magnify any challenges or problems, you know. I mean, I've had times when I started, like when I was really going hard, I've had times when I had to worry about paying people when I knew I had no money in the account and tomorrow was payday. And I had to think, how do I pay these people? How do I get across this hurdle, you know? And I've had to come across those things, you know, and I've had to sell off some of my furniture. I mean, I've had to sell off some things to be able to pay people. I've had to sell off some of my cars, my bikes, to make sure I keep the ball rolling, you know? So, and those things we hardly talk about. But yeah, I mean, like, it's hard. Being an entrepreneur is hard. It's a lot of hard work. And you sometimes sit and ask yourself, do I know what I'm doing? Like, is this really working, you know? And sometimes you look at the guys around you who just have jobs, who just go to work, come back, get paid, and then enjoy the little money that they make and go to work, come back.
Little money.
But you like, they look happier.
Yeah, you know. And,
no stress that you have.
Less stress, less issues. I mean, you just focus on your family and you just live life. And like, but why do you have to put my pay rent or bond or whatever? Why? And you think to yourself, why do I have to put myself through so much, you know? But when you get to a point where you can book a month trip to Europe without having to source funds, without having to pool savings, put things together, where you just go to Europe for a month and you just enjoy it, no stress, then you realize it's all worth it.
Especially when the rent is at 20 rands to the dollar.
Yeah, that's probably that was probably the pinch. You know, but I think I'm glad you're highlighting that, because I think it is critical that I think the entrepreneurial journey, like Nico's saying, sometimes there's so much focus on the benefits. And the challenge is people either don't discuss them enough or they're not highlighted enough. Because what I love about any entrepreneurial journey from people that we profile or people we see is a lot of the sleepless nights lead to innovation, leads you to stretching yourself. And when you're really stretched, that's when you get to your deepest recesses of your creativity. Because in, like you're saying, I've been there before in projects. I've pawned like assets where we need to, for example, we did a solar project. Things will change, like, you know, we didn't do proper due diligence with this, and then you find that the duty is not, there's duty on this project, even though it's a renewable project, and then now you can't go back to your client for extra funds. The client's forked out like $500,000, and the balance is on completion of the project. But in pivoting, it's also thinking that when it seems like you don't have options, that you, as an entrepreneur, you will always find a way through. Because in your case, especially with people depending on you, and you've got a good team, you want to keep them motivated. That's always the greatest thing why I love about entrepreneurial stories and how to find a way.
Can I share a story? I think your question. Can I share one story actually? Adam Rimad. I think this was around 2020 in August. I think during COVID, that's when I started going big in this thing. You know, I remember I was in Free State, right? I was in the Free State, and I was coming back to Joburg, and I mean, I drove a BMW 4 Series convertible, right?
Red seats.
Oh, yeah, and I didn't know. Apparently, there were sports seats or whatever. I didn't know this. But someone was like, "Oh, your car is sports seats." I'm like, "Okay," but I don't have that kind anymore, right? Yeah. So I was on my way back to Gauteng, and I didn't have petrol.
Okay.
Now I had a project that had to be launched. I think this was the biggest project at the time, and now I was flat broke. Now the thing with properties, you realize that when you start, you still have a lot of money. It's all, you know, buying bricks and cement. That's the cheap stuff. But once you get to the finishes, my man, that's when things start hitting the fan. You know.
House.
So I literally had very little petrol. I was in Bloemfontein. Actually, I drove into into an engine garage. I sat there and I opened my bank accounts. The one had 32 cents in it. The other one had, I still remember it had 59 cents. Now, no petrol. I need to get literally no petrol. I think my range had even showed 0. And I knew that I was lucky to make it. I literally sat there and I thought to myself, so I had about 30 bucks on me. I was like, let me get a cup of coffee so I can sit and think, how do I get home? And I went in there, and God is great, Buffett. God is great. So as I walked in, I was about to buy a cup of coffee. This guy said to me, the one guy who works at Engine said to me, do you have a Wimpy app? I said to him, no, I don't. Why? He said to me, Wimpy is running a special today. So if you go to that Wimpy and you download the app, if you download the app today, they give you a free burger and a coffee. I said, really? So yeah. I was like, okay, no, thanks. I literally didn't buy that coffee. Went back there to Wimpy and said, can I download the app? I said, yeah, download the app. I downloaded the app. I had my free lunch, right? Yeah. I went, sat outside in the sun and thought to myself, how do I get back home now?
Yeah, food is done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
stomach is full, the car is empty.
Yeah. And by the way, that's when I started thinking about funding people at 2%. That's how that concept was born. Because I was there and I said to someone, listen, I called one of my friends and said to him, listen, but I didn't tell him that I didn't have money to get back home. I said to him, listen, I have this project that requires 20,000 rands. And now I knew what I needed to get that money at that point in time. I said to him, if you give me 20,000 rands, these people are going to pay us in a month's time with at 2% interest. I said to him, would you be interested? Say yes. I said to him, you need to pay now. These guys are waiting for me to pay that money.
Sounds like a scam. You pay now.
I said to him, I said to him, make sure it clears now. So that, and I sat there, and fortunately we had similar banks, So he paid this to me. Here's the money. I said, God, you are great. Filled up the car, drove back home, and that is how I started getting people to fund my project at 2%. Okay. Before then, I didn't know that thing. I could do that.
Yeah, it took the Beamer to run out of range, and then see within the corner. That's when the entrepreneurial brain really kicks in.
Exactly. But so that's what I was saying. I mean, being an entrepreneur is tough. I mean, someone else could have just stayed home and not push a project that would get them broke to that point.
Yeah, and just to maybe give people who are watching or listening a flavor, right? How many buildings does your business currently have, and rooms wise, like what yeah.
So I think we counted it the last time, I think about 2 months ago. We're actually sitting on 80 now. We actually have 80 units. 80 unit.
How long take you to build up to that?
All in Gauteng.
All in Gauteng, but spread around the East Rand and northeastern suburbs, something like that, yeah. So to get to that point, I think it took us about
all unfunded,
except for that one project. Yeah. But like I said, even that property now, if we were to sell that property, we'd be able to get our money back and have a lot of money. We'd probably sell it for more than double what we owe the bank for that, So we've really gone crazy.
But why don't you just get like overdraft for a business?
No, I don't want to go that route. I think that's why I'm at a point where I'm saying I want to rather sectional title and then sell off. And then that's the route I want to go.
Yeah, and just a follow-up question, right? What type of properties are we talking? Just, from you have exposure in the townships and in some of these northern suburbs, and then just like what does one, if one can imagine a typical
houses
property that you have, what does it look like?
So most of them are self-sustaining or self-containing units, or bachelor flats. So it's a bachelor flat with a kitchenette and a bathroom, like fully kitted shower, toilets and stuff. But what we're doing now is we're actually trying to look more into building smaller family units. So we're going into the 1-bedroom spaces now. So we're looking at building 1-bedroom spaces now. So that's where we're going now, because sometimes we get tenants that say, hey, it's me, my girlfriend and a child, they're like, nah, we wouldn't want to accommodate in a bachelor flat, So then now that's the route we're going. We're looking at building 1-bedroom flats now.
And have you ever looked at anything outside the residential property?
So we tried it, but I think I wasn't very, I don't know. Maybe, I also feel I failed myself, So we wanted to go the co-working spaces or shared spaces business, But I think that was a completely different market, because we'd built it, everything was ready. We were just waiting we had furniture, everything, But I think I wasn't patient enough to let that go. But I also realized quickly that it was a completely different market. Now we had to start marketing things. We had to start getting marketing companies, pay people to do marketing. Whereas in the residential space, people knew us. People would be like, hey, I'm looking for a place, We didn't need to do marketing.
You had built a reputation.
We built, exactly. We had a reputation. But now for the first time, we had to pay people to do marketing, to do recruitment and all of those things. And then I was like, ish, maybe not what I want to do now. But yeah, so to answer your question, no, we are purely residential, but we would love to get into commercial at some point, yeah.
And then tell me, what's your, because you really apply yourself to everything that happens. How do you see the town planning aspect of all of this? Government, the rules that come with this stuff. Like, what's your sense of them? How do you Because I know that's probably a headache of its own, Nje.
It is, yeah. But I think even there, I think you have to, and I must say we've been screwed a few times. I've lost a lot of money. I've lost close to just over 100,000 rands just to architects and town planners who didn't do anything. I've lost money, I've paid school fees, but I think we've fortunately been able to build a reputation with good town planners, engineers, architects, and they have relationships with people that work within the government and council and all of that. So yeah, so now I think we're at a point where these guys know what we do and they understand what we do, and evaluators as well, property evaluators. So they know what we do and they know what our needs are. So we just call them in and tell them this is what we want to do, and they conceptualize the whole thing. They then draw it, and then we then come and have conversations and meetings about what's happening and stuff, and then they were able to run with the process. So we just need to pay them now. So I think we've built a good reputation with all of those professionals. And we work with like an amazing engineer. Like that guy is just amazing, easygoing, and it's all about getting the work done and getting things right. He's quick when it comes to helping us out. He's quick in terms of approvals, and the town planners that we work with are very experienced. The architects are very experienced. So yeah, so we've been able to over the years build that set of skills as well. But like I said, I've lost a lot of money that route as well.
Yeah, because I think that's one thing that needs to be highlighted. In our last episode, we touched on when you invest in township properties, you need to make yourself almost part of that community and understand the area, understand the people, linguistics, because I think obviously outside coming in, even if you're from that area, the people there, not suspicious, but you have to have an understanding of because I think what then happens is that's where some of the school fees are paid in, not understanding. It's never as cut and dried as people make it seem when they get on platforms and say, I went in this area, I built, started collecting rent. Those are the headaches. But I still want to come back to the question in terms of, I'm keen to know timeline and how long it took you to get to 80 rooms, just the journey, like for you to get to where you are now from when you started.
So if we start from 2017 when I built my first, I think I had 5 units in 2018, I had 5 units. 2017, 2018, I had 5 units. This is the first property I bought, and then at the time, I then took a pause. I didn't continue building until 2019. So if we look at the time that I did not stop, or the time that I started and just did not stop and just focused on the business, I think it took me about 4 years, and so I think we've been able to build on average about 20 units per year.
Yes, that is aggressive, yeah.
Yeah, so we did go aggressively. But I must say, I won't lie, we went aggressive, like we went completely aggressive to a point where I sold off furniture, I sold off my furniture, I sold off my cars, I sold off bikes. I literally had to strip myself bare minimum to get to where I am, And literally moved from having 2 cars and a bike and now to just 1 bakkie. And sometimes, at times I had to drive like a 50,000 rand car as the only car that I have,
Put everything in the business.
Literally put everything in the business. Like got to a point where I literally, even my salary would come in and it would go to the business. Come in. There was a time when I literally, I always joke about this. I say, the Bible always says, men will not live by bread alone, but also by the words that come from the Lord's mouth, Yeah. I also say I realized what men can live on petrol and electricity only. I literally got to a point where I knew I needed to make sure I had electricity paid and I had petrol in my car just to get around, and I was fine. In terms of food, there were times when I'd literally go and eat with the guys outside when they were making their own food as builders, and they'll think, "Oh, Mlung is humble," and yes, I mean, I was humble, but at times I knew I needed this meal.
Life humbled you.
Yeah, you know.
So this is the crazy part of it all, and then you go and still become a lecturer.
Exactly.
Like now you are there, like you.
Yeah.
But that's
I would have quit the job, eh?
I couldn't.
Yeah. I understand the financial benefits, like
I couldn't. I mean, even now, I mean, I could. I mean, if I wanted to, but I don't think I want to, because I think I still want to push a bit more. But I think but with time, you like the strain becomes less and less, even financially. You know, if you wanna build a 500,000 rand. If you want to do a 500,000 development now, the strain on you will be a lot less than 4 years ago or 3 years ago, you know. So I don't need to sell furniture anymore, you know.
Yeah. But I think that's a beautiful story, because I think what I like you're highlighting is just how it pushes every entrepreneur in terms of what you think you're capable of: innovation, creativity, finances, and really like getting into the deeper recesses of thinking, how far can I go with this? And I think what I would like to highlight is it also comes back to how vested is someone as an entrepreneur in what you're pursuing. Like you mentioned with the commercial space, that for you were saying you maybe let yourself down in terms of you didn't give it more time, but also it was the realization that, look, we are really expertise in the residential. This commercial space is a new kettle of fish for us. You can probably still go back and do it, but I think what you learn from that is probably will give you enough preparation to say, if we want to go back to this space, this is how we approach it. Here is now where we're solidified. But it's just the journey is building as you're going along and learning lessons, and lecturing at the same time.
Yeah.
So just before we wrap up, I think we're almost on an hour. I think one of the interesting thing is really your topic for your
PhD.
For your PhD on black tax. If you could just maybe give us insights into what you're trying to.
Yeah. So people say I always light up when I talk about this. So I try not to
You can see this, man.
No, but it's good to be passionate about a subject, especially when you have to research it.
Yeah. So what the study aims to do is, so I build a case to say our tax authorities should consider giving some kind of tax relief to individuals who are subjected to black tax, you know. And I build that case on two premises. On international practice, and I think in my study I look at about 10 countries that are already doing that, you know, that where if an individual is taking care of their parents and their own family, then those countries then give relief because they realize the stresses that these individuals are facing, which have been proven are a lot more than people who are not faced with that, you know. And that's the first premise. And the second premise is on the fact that, looking at the history of our country, it was the history of our country that squarely pushed us to this position, you know. So on those bases, I then build a case to say, okay, I think our tax authorities should consider some kind of tax relief for individuals who are actually who are actually paying this. And in my thesis, what I've done is I've interviewed about 20 tax experts, and of those 20 experts, about 80% of them think SARS should actually do that, versus the 20% that think they shouldn't. But also, very interestingly, the 20% that said no did not say no on principle or in principle to say, no, this principle is wrong, whatever, no. The concerns they had were more towards the administration and the corruption that will come from that, rather than the principle itself. So in their view, they recognize the need for this, and they recognize that this would actually be a good initiative, but they're more concerned about the corruption that will come from
the potential loopholes that will be exploited.
That will be exploited and all of those things. So that's what the thesis looks at doing. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
How's the research going thus far?
So I have the full document, about 350 pages. But I think by the time I'm done, I'll be on 400 pages, because there's some things that my supervisors want me to add. So I'm busy making a few changes that my supervisor want me to make. And but I think by the end of this month, I would have submitted the final document. I've submitted the final document, and it came back with some changes, which I'm busy with now. I think if I invest the next 2 weeks into this thing, by end of June, I would actually have the whole thing done.
So
doctor,
people's I was about to say that people's landlord, people will have a landlord named Dr. Sibia.
Exactly. But I think that is a great topic, because I think, like Tisa was highlighting, with the history of South Africa and how the black community was pushed into that stress, it is definitely needed. Obviously, with the slight challenge of maybe that can be exploited, but I always say on this platform that the government can only do so much to uplift the community, and that'll be one way. Giving tax reprieve is basically one way to uplift, and because you find when we talk in terms of not making like a race thing, those who are well off, maybe on the Caucasian side, they don't have that burden of black tax. And when black people bring it up, it sounds like it's more just a way to an excuse, but it's actually a real thing of taking care of extended family. So any form of reprieve then frees up disposable income that can be put into investments or property or and other, even education for the black community. But we wish you obviously well with that project, and we really appreciate you coming through. I mean, great story, many insights. Hopefully, we can have you again on the platform and then probably share more insights in your journey, where you'll be at the time. By then you'll be a doctor.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're also gonna go nationally with your property journey, or you still gonna stick to Joburg? Have you thought of other provinces and things like that?
So we have thought of KZN. So we are looking at KZN around Umlazi and Harding. I think it's called Harding, one of the places. So we are busy doing some groundwork there, trying to understand the market. One of the things we'll do is we'll send like 2 or 3 of the guys to stay around Umlazi for like 2 to 3 months, and then just work out what it's like there, and then maybe give us feedback, and then based on that decide what we want to do.
Yeah, do some on ground research before you go in there. Exactly. Also quite thorough process.
But congratulations, man.
Thanks, guys. Thanks.
I know, it's definitely not an easy journey. But at least it's fulfilling, especially to yourself, because your own dreams and your own ambitions. Speaking from the sidelines, it's inspiring. And I think we speak for a lot of people when you say it, because I think that's another part of, the issues that black people have. Like, we do really sometimes lack role models. We lack people that show us how it can be done legally, just hard work and sort of building yourself up. You know what I mean? We grew up in a country where corruption looks attractive. You know what I mean?
So we need to debunk that idea.
It's
quite good to hear stories of people like you. Thank you.
Maybe
for
I can
sharing
ask you
this
guys
story.
a question as well.
Yeah.
Just to reverse the roles. So, and the thing is, the reason why I'm asking is I grapple with it, and I think within property it's very difficult to find this. But how important is mentorship to you in terms of entrepreneurship? Like, how important is it for you to have a mentor, and maybe to have a mentor within your space? Yeah.
I'll say for myself, I think it's definitely important, especially if you have no background into it. Property is one of those careers that anybody can do it. As soon as you have salary and you have extra money, you start buying a place, and next thing you are in the space itself. You know what I mean? And it's complex. There's people that go to school for these things. You know what I mean? So I think it's critical. But the unfortunate part is mentors will never take the lessons away from you. They're just there to help you navigate it. The school fees still gotta be paid. And I suppose the other benefit for me that I've seen, where it really helped is when they ask you first, define what you want, because it's very easy to start doing different things. So sometimes they'll help you, guide you, say, okay, focus, if this is what you want, focus on that, and then they help you to narrow it down,
streamline.
But from what I've seen, the lessons, the pains, those will always come. It's just that it feels better that there's someone you can call, you can speak to. And also the important part for me, especially when you also include mentors from other races, because that's what I've also done. Then they help you realize, okay, this, it can move from 80 to 800 to 8,000 properties. You
widen your scope of thinking.
You see it through. So I totally believe in it. But I also think it might not shield you all the way. It will help you maybe lose money, to not lose all money. You know what I'm saying? Because there's people that really make big losses in this journey just because they didn't get the right help. And for me, that's painful. But some of us, you won't lose money, but the school fees is still school fees.
Yeah, I think Tiza, you've taken the words out of my mouth as well. For me, it's critical to have a sounding board, and for myself, I don't know if you're asking this question because I was asking you so many questions recently. But obviously for me, well, I would say you are that person to me who obviously I ask.
Thank you. I didn't know that.
I ask 1,000 questions a day and all of that, but at the end of the day, I guess with the losses, the lessons. I wish I could have called you to come and take the losses as well, but those were facing me directly. So the importance is there certainly, because at the end of the day, you need someone who can help you avoid certain things, right? Like there are some losses which you can avoid by listening to you now. Other guys listening to this now, they know exactly the pains that go with this, and it helps to have someone you can have such conversations with, right? And also in terms of solutions, we don't have all the solutions. I remember on my first property, I think we sat down at a shop and then we broke down the property. You wrote it down at the back of a menu or something like that, and that's the plan we went for in the end. So and then I had a very different idea and all of that, but highlighting the importance then of having someone to talk to. And then I guess then I'll ask you if you have a mentor and who you talk to.
Yeah, and I was hoping you didn't ask that. And the reason why I'm asking is because I don't have a mentor. I would have loved to have one. And there's actually one person that I met, and I thought they would consider themselves my mentor, but they just didn't have time for me. They didn't have
capacity.
Yeah, capacity. But more than just capacity, I think they were just not keen on doing it. So it's just that I always ask myself, would my journey have been a lot easier or lighter if I had a mentor or not? And that's just something I've always asked myself. To this day, I don't have.
I think most certainly it would have been easier, and I don't know if everyone knows how I met Busani, but he was essentially my varsity mentor who became my mentor, my friend, and everything as well, right? So certainly, well, I'm not saying my life is easy, but I think a mentor does make a difference in when you're trying to make some life decisions and all of that in general, that you can chat to someone like a bigger brother or something like that, So it certainly does make a huge difference.
I guess the other thing is would you listen? Because that's the other part of it. Do you, as your persona? Because I often people that don't have mentors, it's because if you're great, right? Sometimes you don't need someone to steer you off the path. You know what I'm saying? If someone was gonna tell you you're being too aggressive, I don't know how that would have turned out. You know what I'm saying? 4 years, 80 properties. So sometimes maybe you must just believe in yourself that you have it figured out, if you know what I'm saying. Yeah. Because one thing I love and understand about some talents is they rather need to be nurtured than to be, do you know what I mean? Yeah. So sometimes, maybe you do need it, but maybe you do need to believe in yourself as well.
True.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I think in closing, my perspective on the mentorship thing is, I think like Tisa rightfully said, it's not going to take away, the school fees are going to be paid in some shape or form. But the good thing about a mentor who's also willing, because I've had situations where, sometimes if you try and get mentors and there's no capacity, the relationship won't be beneficial. It has to be all in on both sides. And good point from Tisa saying, also try to get mentors from within different fields, different race, because they'll give a different perspective. You might be looking at it from your lens and they'll tell you how far you can really take it in other ways you can really benefit from the process. So always good to have a sounding board, have a mentor. And and mentorship is not obviously infinite. You can have it for a specific period like you would for a project, and that might be more appealing to someone because of time commitments. You're an entrepreneur, the person's busy, but if you want that person to sit with you for that particular time, they'll be more inclined to help. And I think in terms of the information we'll share on this podcast, I think it's good that black people, because I know I've met people who you ask them to be a mentor and they never even thought about being a mentor. They actually get honored that you consider them and that they feel that you feel that they have something they can bring to the table. So we need to start tapping into those relationships, because also there's an understanding of our challenges as black people and how we can overcome them, especially from those who've walked the journey. So in closing, gentlemen, thank you so much for a great episode, great story, Busani. We look forward to re-engaging with you in the future, seeing where your story is, hopefully by then, if you continue with this aggressive pace, who knows where you might be, but just continue doing what you're doing. Nico, Tisa, thank you so much. Thank you to Tsepo, Tabi, who does our audios, and our Maza in absentia. This has been episode 17 of the Business Agenda podcast. This podcast is available on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll catch you on the next one. Cheers.
Peace.
Peace.
Peace.